Schools are a place where students are taught to respect one another and learn to work together regardless of their differences. Teaching students about gender diversity is part of that work. If we educate ourselves about gender diversity and model acceptance for our students, we will set the tone for a safe and accepting school environment. Please use the link provided to take a quiz on gender and sexuality. Were you surprised by your level of knowledge related to gender and sexuality? Being raised in a diverse culture with differing views, how would you think your own perspective could possibly affect your position on this topic? Take a look at the genderbread person. This image illustrates the wide continuum of gender and sexuality. It is important to remember that gender and sex are not necessarily mutually inclusive. Gender is comprised of a person's physical and genetic traits, their own sense of gender identity, and their gender expression. Many fall into strongly masculine or feminine categories. Others fall somewhere in the middle and are more androgynous, having and or sharing both feminine and masculine characteristics. Sexual orientation is a person's sexual or romantic attraction. Gender identity is one's own personal sense of being male, female, both, or neither. Are you surprised by the fluidity of gender, biological sex, and sexuality? Do you have any questions related to a transgender student? If you do have negative or confusing feelings about transgender students, how will you manage your feelings and still support that student? Can you think of other instances where the public has questioned their own assumptions, misconceptions, and biases towards students considered to be different? What do you think are the potential consequences of a student not feeling accepted when transitioning? Every child deserves an opportunity to be at school. Gender-based harassment can be widespread in schools and affect all students, not just those who are transgender or gender expansive. Dispelling harmful stereotypes of all kinds creates space where every student has the opportunity to learn and thrive. When students' learning takes a back seat to worrying about which restroom they can use safely or face a bully on the bus ride home, they are less likely to succeed academically. Students experiencing higher levels of victimizations based on gender expression are twice as likely to report that they did not plan to pursue post-secondary education. When targeted, Lgbtq students face long-term effects on their mental health, higher risk of suicide, and decreased life satisfaction as young adults. These negative experiences can result in lifelong lasting negative effects. It is important for us to explore and manage our own feelings and confusion regarding transgender students so that we can support them and help them to feel accepted. What are some potential issues that you see may arise when working with a transgender student? Consistently using a transgender student's chosen name and pronoun signals that a speaker is listening and affirming the transgender student's gender identity. An educator or administrator using a student's chosen name and pronoun models and sets expectations for the school community, making the student feel safe and welcome. Transgender students have the right to dress in a manner consistent with their gender identity as long as the attire applies with the school dress code. Another crucial element in supporting transgender students is giving them access to sex-separated facilities, activities, or programs based on the student's gender identity. This will require school personnel to re-examine beliefs about who belongs in a particular space. Ultimately, the school culture must be developed to show that it values and respects gender diversity. Restroom and locker room spaces also present a unique challenge. In 2015, Media Matters for America contacted officials at the largest school districts in the U.S. that have laws protecting transgender students. None of these schools reported any incidents of harassment or inappropriate behavior as a result of allowing transgender students access to facilities in which they are comfortable. It is in fact the norm in our society to allow people to choose facilities without proving their gender. Providing transgender students with access to restrooms and locker rooms that match their gender identity is yet another way that schools can adjust to meet students' individual needs. By state law, students have full access to all facilities associated with their affirmed identity. Private facilities can be offered but are never required. All students have the choice of a private facility, for example, the nurse's office, or a communal one associated with their affirmed identity. Overnight field trips are also something to think about. This is an issue that a school will actually have to think about for all students in the event of an overnight trip. A school should anticipate potential issues, explore the issues with the student, and develop a plan prior to the trip. Schools have an implicit obligation to set clear expectations regarding students' privacy and boundaries. Explicitly naming expectations and having staff supervising that these expectations are met will improve all students' experience on an overnight trip. Homecoming and prom are school traditions that are important to many students. Transgender students are no exception. Schools should allow transgender students to participate in all school traditions. For transgender students who want to be seen by their peers as their authentic self, participating in traditions like running for homecoming court can be very life-affirming. Allowing transgender students an opportunity like this provides validation from the school and their peers. There are limitless areas where we must think about inclusion of transgender students. Please remember that as a school team, it is your obligation to address these areas with your administration and develop plans in which transgender students feel supported. Unfortunately, transgender youth experience a high level of family rejection. Oftentimes, school is a safe haven for transgender students. Schools can play a critical role in alleviating the psychological distress caused by family rejection. Clinical counseling can provide the student with the support and coping skills to withstand the stress of family rejection. In the case of family rejection, the student and school should work together to develop a plan on how to balance the student's need to be affirmed at school with the reality that the student does not have that same support at home. Things to take into consideration in these cases are modifications, how to refer to the student when parent or siblings are present, what information to share, and how to address questions by family or peers if the student's status is private. A student's personal safety can be at risk if these things are not taken into consideration. At these times, we must presume positive intentions by the parent and realize that oftentimes a parent's negative reaction can come from a place of love and protection. Rejection or denial can be a misguided attempt to protect. Special education laws create a mechanism for accommodating the needs of students who are experiencing difficulty in school. The difficulty does not have to be solely academic. It can include social and emotional well-being and development. Given the psychological distress that some transgender students face, these laws provide a potential tool for schools to address a transgender student's unique needs and create an environment where the student can succeed. Transgender students may be eligible for special education due to gender dysphoria, but may also qualify because of the anxiety, depression, and other psychological distress caused by not having his or her identity affirmed in all aspects of their life. Title IX is a federal law that prohibits discrimination based on sex in any education program or activity receiving federal funding. Courts have recognized that this includes protections against discrimination and harassment related to sex stereotypes and gender identity. The Family Education Rights and Privacy Act, FERPA, is another law that provides protection to transgender students. This law gives school personnel discretion to discuss students' information among themselves where there is a legitimate educational purpose. If it is viewed that a transgender status is private, then it should remain private, even in the context of staff communication within the school setting. Transgender students are also protected from discrimination in school by state anti-discrimination laws. The final layers of protection are rooted in our constitutional rights to free speech, privacy, and equal protection. In the end, regardless of how many legal protections a particular student may have, courts look at best practices and the reasonableness of the school conduct to determine whether or not a student's rights have been violated. As school staff, we should collaborate with students, parents, and other stakeholders to create a safe and supportive school environment for all students. That approach will ensure social, emotional, and academic growth and well-being. Please watch the video. Afterwards, think about what your thoughts are regarding Jazz and her family. Did it test any preconceived thoughts you may have regarding gender and sexuality? Please continue to explore your own thoughts and feelings. How would you handle these conversations with a student? Explore your initial thoughts, feelings, and reactions. A student comes up to you and confides in you. I told my mom that I think I'm trans, but she thinks it's just a phase. What if she's right? I really don't want to come out and ask people to use my preferred name and pronouns and then have it mean nothing. What if I decide that I'm not really a man? Lately, I've had this desire to be a girl. I know I'm not ready for a sex change, but I'm planning to grow out my hair and wear my more girly type of clothes. I'm not sure that my parents would make of what my parents would make of it, but I can't get this off my mind. Should I go ahead with it? My family is strictly Catholic. I've been having these thoughts for as long as I can remember. Recently, I've been thinking about wanting to be a girl more often because I feel like I'm in the wrong body. When I'm at home, I sneak into my sister's room when she is not there to try on her clothes. I look in the mirror and feel like this is who I am. But this is something I can never tell my family about because they will abandon me. I do not want to be living on the streets. As I transition into this new body that makes me feel more comfortable, I'm afraid of how other boys are going to react, especially when I'm using the restroom. If someone were to bully me, who would be a safe person to talk to? How would you handle these conversations with the student? Explore your initial thoughts, feelings, and reactions. Remember that the counseling team is here to guide and support you and your students. If you are ever feeling unsure about how to respond to a student, it is appropriate to provide the student with some supportive words and let him or her know you will get back to them.